Getty's first major triumph came in 1916 when he struck oil in Oklahoma's Tulsa County, turning a $500 investment into his first million at age 24. This early success shaped his business philosophy: careful investment combined with bold action when opportunity arose. He meticulously studied geological reports and industry trends, building his expertise in the oil business from the ground up. His personal life, however, proved more challenging than his business ventures. Married and divorced 5 times, father to 5 sons by 4 different women, Getty increasingly focused on his business dealings and art collecting. His first marriage to Jeanette Demont lasted from 1923 to 1926, setting a pattern of personal relationships that would be repeated throughout his life. The contrast between his business success and personal struggles became increasingly apparent as his wealth grew. While Getty Oil expanded across the globe, securing lucrative rights in Saudi Arabia that would multiply his fortune many times over, his family relationships became increasingly complex. He maintained contact with his children primarily through letters and phone calls from his English estate. From Sutton Place, Getty managed his empire with careful attention to costs that sometimes bordered on frugality. The famous payphone he installed for guests became a symbol of his complex relationship with wealth, a billionaire who believed strongly in watching every dollar. Yet this same man built one of the world's greatest private art collections, though always with an eye for value and investment potential. His art collection represented more than just an assemblage of beautiful objects. It was a legacy he hoped would endure. Each carefully chosen piece reflected both his taste and his business acumen, as he often managed to acquire masterpieces at surprisingly reasonable prices through clever negotiation and timing. But as the 1960s dawned, Getty's empire stood at its apex. His wealth had grown to unprecedented levels, making him the richest private citizen in the world. None could have predicted the dark shadow that would soon engulf his family, turning their vast wealth into a curse that would echo through generations. The price of creating such an empire would be paid not by its architect, but by those who inherited its burden. The story of the Getty sons unfolded against the backdrop of America's post-war boom, when their father's wealth had reached heights that seemed almost mythological. But money, as each would discover, offered no protection against personal demons, and sometimes seemed to attract them instead. George F. Getty II, the eldest son, bore the heaviest expectations. Born in 1924 to J. Paul Getty's first wife, Jeanette Demont, George entered a world already shaped by the weight of the Getty name. Intelligent and hard-working, he served in World War II before joining Getty Oil. Unlike his father's other sons, George embraced the oil business, displaying an aptitude that suggested he might one day take over the empire. The relationship between father and son was complex. J. Paul Getty respected George's business acumen, but maintained the same exacting standards he applied to everyone in his organization. Their correspondence revealed a formal relationship filled with discussions of business matters but little personal warmth. George worked diligently to prove himself worthy of the Getty name, taking on increasing responsibilities within the company. Eugene Paul Getty, later known as John Paul Getty Jr., chose a dramatically different path. Born in 1932 to J. Paul Getty's third wife, Adolphine Helmley, Eugene Paul initially worked for the family business, managing Getty Oil's Italian operations. However, by the 1960s, he had embraced the counterculture movement that was sweeping Europe. Eugene Paul's second marriage to Talitha Pohl in 1966 marked his complete break from the corporate world his father inhabited. Talitha, a model and actress of Dutch extraction, became an icon of 1960s style. Their palazzo in Rome became a gathering place for artists, musicians, and European nobility. The couple embodied a new kind of aristocracy, one that merged old money with bohemian sensibilities. J. Ronald Getty, born in Berlin on the 19th of December 1929, to J. Paul Getty and his fifth wife, Anne Rourke, maintained a lower profile than his brothers. He chose to forge his own path outside the family business, though he remained involved in family matters, particularly during the later crises that would engulf the Getty name. Gordon Peter Getty, born on the 20th of December, 1933, also to J. Paul Getty and Anne Rourke, would eventually emerge as perhaps the most successful of the brothers in handling the family wealth. Combining his father's business sense with artistic sensibilities, Gordon studied music while maintaining his business interests. This unusual combination of talents would later serve him well as a trustee of the Getty fortune. But it was the trajectory of George Getty II that would first signal the dark turn in the family's story. Despite his apparent success in business, George struggled with personal demons. In 1951, he married Gloria Gordon, and they had a son together. But by the early 1970s, he was facing mounting pressures, both personal and professional. The end came tragically on the 6th of June 1973, when George died in his Los Angeles home at age 48. Following a fight with his wife, he had locked himself in his bedroom, consumed a combination of alcohol and pills, and suffered a devastating injury with a barbecue fork. After delayed medical attention, he slipped into a coma and died, leaving behind questions that would never be fully answered. The death of George Getty II marked a turning point in the family narrative. Within months, another tragedy would strike, one that would capture international headlines and forever change how the world viewed the Getty name. The kidnapping of J. Paul Getty III, Eugene Paul's teenage son, would transform the family's private struggles into public spectacle, revealing the dark side of inheriting one of the world's greatest fortunes. On the 10th of July 1973, in Rome's Piazza Farnese, John Paul Getty III, the 16-year-old son of Eugene Paul Getty, vanished. The teenager, known for his bohemian lifestyle and long red hair, had been living semi-independently in Rome, frequenting the city's nightclubs and art scenes while his father battled drug addiction in England. Initially, when the kidnapping was reported, few took it seriously. The young Getty had previously joked about staging his own kidnapping to extract money from his notoriously frugal grandfather. Even the Italian police were skeptical, suggesting it might be a hoax orchestrated by a teenager seeking attention or funds. This skepticism would prove to be a devastating miscalculation. 2 days after the disappearance, his mother, Gail Harris, received a ransom demand. "We have kidnapped Paul Getty's grandson," it stated. The kidnappers demanded $17 million for his safe return. What followed would become one of the most notorious kidnapping cases in history, exposing the dark paradox at the heart of the Getty fortune. J. Paul Getty's response from Sutton Place shocked the world. "I have 14 grandchildren," he declared, "and if I pay 1 penny of ransom, I'll have 14 kidnapped grandchildren." Behind this seemingly callous response lay his conviction that paying ransoms only encouraged more kidnappings. He also harbored doubts about the authenticity of the kidnapping, suspecting his grandson's involvement in staging it. The situation created an impossible bind for the boy's parents. His father, Eugene Paul Getty, was still struggling with drug addiction in London and had no access to the kind of money the kidnappers demanded. His mother, Gail Harris, had received virtually no settlement after her divorce from Eugene Paul and was essentially penniless, despite the family name. The Getty fortune, worth billions, sat tantalizingly out of reach while a teenager's life hung in the balance. As weeks turned into months, the kidnappers grew increasingly frustrated. Their ransom demands were met with silence or negotiations for lower amounts. The boy was held in the mountains of Calabria under harsh conditions, moved frequently between hiding places to avoid detection. His captors, later identified as members of the 'Ndrangheta crime syndicate, began to lose patience. Then, in November 1973, an envelope arrived at the offices of Il Messaggero newspaper. Inside was a lock of red hair and a human ear, along with a threat. Reduce the ransom to $3 million, or the next package would contain something worse. Accompanying the gruesome delivery was a letter from the young Getty. "This is Paul's ear. If we don't get some money within 10 days, then the other ear will arrive. In other words, he will arrive in little bits." This grotesque turn finally spurred action. J. Paul Getty agreed to contribute $2.2 million toward the ransom, while John Paul Getty Jr. covered the remainder. After painstaking negotiations, the final ransom was set at $2.8 million. On the 15th of December 1973, 5 months after his abduction, John Paul III was found at an abandoned gas station between Rome and Naples. The physical ordeal was over, but the psychological damage had only begun. The young Getty called his grandfather to thank him for securing his release, but J. Paul Getty refused to come to the phone. This final rejection would haunt the teenager as he struggled to rebuild his life in the aftermath of the kidnapping. The case exposed the paradoxes of vast wealth, a family with billions at their disposal, yet paralyzed by distrust, dysfunction, and the complex dynamics of inherited fortune. The kidnapping of John Paul Getty III would become more than just a sensational crime story. It would serve as a dark parable about wealth, family, and the price of being born into one of the world's most famous fortunes. In the years following the kidnapping, the dark shadow over the Getty family only deepened. The physical and psychological aftermath would shape not only John Paul Getty III's life, but the entire family's trajectory. In 1974, he married Gisela Martine Zacher, who was pregnant with their son, marking a new chapter in his life while still grappling with the trauma of his captivity. J. Paul Getty never saw his grandson after the kidnapping. From his Tudor estate in England, he continued to expand his business empire and art collection, seemingly detached from the family turmoil that surrounded his name. When he died on the 6th of June 1976 at age 83, his net worth stood at $2 billion. His will reflected both his passion for art and his complex relationship with his family. The bulk of his fortune went to the J. Paul Getty Museum Trust. At the time of his death, Getty's oil empire was at its peak. Getty Oil stood as one of America's largest private companies, with interests spanning the globe. The Saudi Arabian concession he had secured in the 1940s had proven to be one of the most lucrative oil deals in history. Yet the patriarch's passing set in motion a series of events that would transform the family fortune. For young John Paul III, the years following the kidnapping were marked by struggle. In 1981, at age 25, a devastating combination of drugs, alcohol and Valium triggered a stroke that left him severely disabled, quadriplegic, nearly blind, and unable to speak. His care would require round-the-clock attention for the rest of his life, with costs running into millions of dollars annually. The 1980s brought significant changes to the Getty fortune. In 1984, after years of complex negotiations, Texaco offered to acquire Getty Oil for $9.9 billion. Gordon Getty, as trustee of the family trust, played a crucial role in orchestrating the sale. While the deal generated tremendous wealth, it also marked the end of the Gettys' direct control over their primary source of wealth, the oil business that J. Paul Getty had built over decades. J. Paul Getty Jr., still battling his own demons in the wake of his son's tragedy, underwent a remarkable transformation. After the death of his beloved wife Talitha and his son's kidnapping, he gradually overcame his drug addiction and eventually became one of Britain's most generous philanthropists. In recognition of his charitable works, he was knighted by Queen Elizabeth II, becoming Sir Paul Getty. The Getty Trust, meanwhile, grew to become one of the world's wealthiest art institutions. The family's legacy would increasingly be defined not by oil, but by art and philanthropy, as the institutions J. Paul Getty founded continued to expand and evolve. But wealth continued to extract its price from the family. Gordon Getty, who had seemed to navigate the family dynamics most successfully, faced his own public scandal in 1999 when it was revealed he had maintained a secret second family in Los Angeles for many years. The news highlighted once again the complex personal lives that seemed to characterize the Getty name. Each generation of Gettys seemed to face its own struggles with the burden of inheritance. The fortune that J. Paul Getty had built through decades of shrewd business decisions had transformed into something else entirely, a complex legacy of art, philanthropy, and family trauma that would continue to shape lives long after the oil wells had been sold. The Getty legacy continues to evolve, shaped by both triumph and tragedy. John Paul Getty III lived for 3 decades after his stroke, requiring constant care until his death in 2011 at age 54. His son, Balthazar Getty, would forge his own path, finding success as an actor in Hollywood, though even he could not entirely escape the weight of the family name. The institutions that bear the Getty name have flourished in ways that perhaps even J. Paul Getty could not have imagined. The Getty Trust, established through his will, has become one of the world's leading cultural and philanthropic organizations. The Getty Center in Los Angeles and the Getty Villa in Pacific Palisades stand as monuments to his vision of making art accessible to the public. Mark Getty, one of J. Paul Getty's grandchildren, demonstrated a different kind of business acumen from his grandfather when he co-founded Getty Images in 1995. This digital media company would become a dominant force in the stock photography and digital media landscape, showing that subsequent generations could build their own enterprises, even if in very different industries from oil. The family's story has captured public imagination in various ways. Books, documentaries, and films have attempted to unravel the complexities of the Getty saga. Most notably, Ridley Scott's 2017 film All the Money in the World dramatized the kidnapping of John Paul Getty III, while the FX series Trust offered a different perspective on the same events. Gordon Getty, now in his late 80s, has devoted much of his life to classical music composition, following his artistic passions while managing the family's business interests. His dual life as both businessman and artist perhaps best exemplifies the transformation of the Getty legacy from pure commerce to a blend of business and cultural pursuits. The Getty family story serves as a complex parable about the nature of inherited wealth in modern America. What began as a pure business empire built on oil and hard-nosed negotiation evolved into something more multifaceted, a source of both cultural enrichment through the Getty Trust's institutions and a cautionary tale about the burdens of inherited wealth. Today, the youngest generations of Gettys continue to make their own mark on the family legacy. Nats Getty, a descendant of J. Paul Getty and child of Ariadne Getty, has emerged as a prominent LGBTQ+ advocate and fashion designer. This represents yet another way the Getty family story has evolved, reflecting changing social values far removed from the conservative oil industry that built their family's fortune. The Getty name remains synonymous with wealth, but its meaning has shifted. What was once primarily associated with oil and industry is now equally connected to art, culture, and philanthropy. The transformation reflects broader changes in American society, from the industrial age that J. Paul Getty dominated to the digital era his descendants now navigate. When you imagine becoming the heiress to a monumental old money fortune that spans not one but 2 European dynasties, you'd likely envision a life draped in luxury, opulent galas, exclusive parties, and leisurely afternoons on sun-drenched yachts. In this world, perfumed by the salty breeze of the Mediterranean and lined with the silks of couture fashion, we'd like to think, only promises a daily existence wrapped in pleasure and privilege. Yet, for Athena Onassis, a descendant of the storied Onassis and Niarchos Greek shipping dynasties, this fantasy was far from reality. Born into wealth that most can only dream of, Athena's life was quickly overshadowed by familial discord and tragedy. For instance, her mother, Christina, led a life marked by emotional turmoil and untimely passing, leaving young Athena with a legacy tinged with sorrow rather than just splendor. Then, inheritance disputes soon followed, entangling Athena's billion-dollar birthright in legal battles and public scrutiny. Worse still, her marriage, which should have been a fairy tale continuation of her storied lineage, crumbled under the weight of betrayal when her husband was reportedly unfaithful. In today's episode, we'll unveil the secrets of this iconic old money heiress, from her 18th birthday celebration that reportedly racked in at least $1 billion to the enigmatic troubles of one of the 21st century's most private heiresses, as we describe, Athena Onassis, the billionaire heiress who can't escape drama. Welcome to the world of Athena Onassis, where money doesn't just talk, it launches 1,000 ships. And Athena, the last in line of the legendary Aristotle Onassis fortune, stands uniquely at the confluence of not one, but two of the grandest shipping empires Greece has ever seen. Imagine, if you will, the colossal weight of inheritance from the Onassis and the Niarchos families, two names that could comfortably fund their own small countries, and often come close, in the form of owning lavish Greek islands. Now, Athena's maternal lineage is a stroll down millionaire's lane, directly leading to Aristotle Onassis, the titan of shipping, who not only collected ships and cash, but also managed to woo Jacqueline Kennedy into a high-profile marriage. And when Aristotle's curtain fell in 1975, he left behind a cool $500 million, chump change by today's billionaire-heavy standards perhaps, but a whopping $2.3 billion when adjusted for inflation. His daughter Christina, Athena's mother, initially held the reins to this fortune until her own untimely demise in 1988, at which point young Athena, a mere tot, became the heiress to what might just be the mother of all piggy banks. But wait, there's more. Athena is not just an Onassis. Through her grandmother, Tina Livanos, she's tied to another behemoth of the seas, Stavros Niarchos, a man whose rivalry with Aristotle was the stuff of Greek legend, with enough plot twists to make a soap opera blush. And Niarchos, who built supertankers as if they were Lego sets, left behind a treasure trove worth $12 billion, ensuring the family gatherings were probably more about asset management than passing the salt. Now, the spoils of this family feud are, in part, real estate galore, mansions in Paris, Geneva, and a little seaside retreat on Ibiza, just for the summer, mind you. And then there was Skorpios, a Greek island so idyllic that Aristotle and Jackie O treated it as their personal Eden. At least, that is until 2013, when Athena handed over the keys to Skorpios to Russian billionaire Ekaterina Rybolovleva, for what we assume was a minor trifle of $150 million US. And because no billionaire's tale is quite complete without mentioning troves of twinkling baubles, Athena's story includes a dazzling array of jewels and a smattering of high art. Rodins here, Impressionists there, the sort of collection that would make even the most seasoned auctioneer weak at the knees. Despite this gold-plated, jewel-encrusted, island-hopping heritage, Athena Onassis tries to keep it low-key, shying away from the glare of the public eye. And yet, all that glitters is not gold in Greece, and Athena Onassis's lineage is chock full of high seas drama, heart-wrenching tragedy, and much more. In the next chapter, we'll roll back the clock and explain how this 21st century heiress has one of the most fascinating backstories we've ever featured on this channel. In the 21st century, Athena Onassis stands at a perilous crossroads, the last of her name, the final heir to the intertwined legacies of two of Greece's most powerful dynasties. Thus, her story is not just hers alone, but a shadowy reflection of two giants, Aristotle Onassis, her grandfather, and Stavros Niarchos, the man who both rivaled and mirrored him in ways that went far beyond mere business. First, Aristotle Onassis, the man who emerged from the ashes of Smyrna, was a force of nature. His journey from a modest start in the bustling ports of what is now Izmir to ruling one of the most formidable shipping empires was nothing short of legendary. And Onassis was more than a businessman. He was a master strategist, a man whose every move was calculated to propel him higher, farther. You see, his marriage to Athena Livanos, the daughter of another shipping magnate, was no simple union of love. It was a strategic alliance, a move that solidified his power within the Greek shipping elite. On the other side was Stavros Niarchos, born into an affluent Athenian family whose eyes were set on the future of global trade. Niarchos was no less ambitious than Onassis, and he too understood the power of strategic marriages. His vision, however, lay in the vast potential of oil transportation, leading him to build a fleet of supertankers that could rival the empire Onassis had painstakingly constructed. Therefore, Niarchos too tied his fate to the Livanos family, marrying Eugenia Livanos, sister to Onassis's wife, and in doing so, he stepped into a rivalry that would become legendary. But the marriages of these two men to the Livanos sisters were not mere social contracts. They were declarations of war, battles fought not with weapons, but with wealth, influence, and legacy. Onassis, never one to shy away from the public eye, cemented his place on the world stage with his marriage to Jacqueline Kennedy, the widow of a fallen American president. This union was a masterstroke, linking him to the world's most powerful political dynasty, a move that resonated across oceans and continents. Yet, their battle was not confined to the seas or the sprawling empires they built. The heirs to these legacies have been shaped in the crucible of this rivalry. Athena Onassis, the last of her line, has chosen a path of discretion, distancing herself from the world her ancestors dominated. Her Niarchos cousins, however, have embraced the public eye, continuing their family's tradition of philanthropy and influence through the Stavros Niarchos Foundation. And yet it was the many would say wild upbringing of Athena's mother, Christina Onassis, that would have the biggest effect on the young heiress's life. Christina Onassis, Athena's mother, entered the world on the 11th of December 1950 in New York City as a child born into the heights of wealth and influence. At the time, her father, Aristotle Onassis, was among the richest men alive, and her mother, Athena Livanos, was the daughter of another aforementioned shipping titan. Thus, Christina's life began in a swirl of luxury, with homes scattered across Paris, Greece, and England. Yet, beneath the surface of this glittering existence, shadows loomed. You see, her parents' marriage, troubled by her father's notorious affair with the opera singer Maria Callas, unraveled when Christina was just 10 years old. And this scandal, played out under the harsh light of public scrutiny, left Christina feeling humiliated. Then, the 1960s were marked by a difficult relationship between Christina and her father. Aristotle Onassis, a man known for his overbearing nature, had high expectations for his daughter, and he intended for her to take over the family empire one day. Yet, while Christina admired her father, their bond was often strained. The tension between them only deepened when Aristotle married Jacqueline Kennedy in 1968. Neither Christina nor her brother Alexander trusted their new stepmother, and they never grew close to her. Therefore, this already fragile family structure was shattered further when Alexander died in a plane crash in 1973, a tragedy that devastated both Christina and her father. The following years brought more sorrow, with the death of her mother in 1974 and her father's passing in 1975. Consequently, Christina was left alone to bear the weight of the Onassis fortune, a burden that would follow her for the rest of her life. Then, the 1970s and 1980s were turbulent years for Christina, marked by a series of troubled marriages. Her first marriage, at just 20 years old, was to Joseph Bolker, a real estate developer who was 27 years older than her, and this union, reportedly disapproved of by her father, lasted a mere 9 months. After her father's death, Christina married Alexander Andreadis, a Greek shipping heir, but this marriage also ended in divorce after just over a year. Her third marriage, to Sergei Kauzov, a Russian shipping agent, fared no better, lasting from 1978 to 1979. But it was in 1984 that Christina entered into her fourth and final marriage with Thierry Roussel, a French businessman and the future father of Athena. Now, Thierry Roussel, born on the 16th of February 1953 in Neuilly-sur-Seine, France, came from a prominent family involved in the pharmaceutical industry. His father, Henri Roussel, led a company responsible for developing the controversial drug RU-486, and Thierry's mother, Francine Grinda, was part of a well-connected family, with her father being the French politician Édouard Grinda. Thierry had two sisters, Patricia and Christine, with the latter becoming a duchess, in fact, and he completed his high school education in 1972 and studied economics at Panthéon-Assas University. Now, Athena's parents, Thierry and Christina, first crossed paths as teenagers, but their lives took different directions before reconnecting in the early 1980s. And despite Thierry's relationship with the Swedish model Marianne Gaby Landage, Christina eventually won him over, and they married in 1984. This marriage, however, was troubled from the start. Christina seemed deeply infatuated with Thierry, but his ongoing affair with Landage and his disinterest in a genuine marital relationship cast a long shadow over their union. Their honeymoon in the Caribbean was the beginning of a rocky marriage. Christina's mental health issues coupled with Thierry's infidelities, made for a volatile relationship. The couple had one child, Athena Onassis Roussel, born in 1985. However, their marriage deteriorated rapidly, and divorce proceedings began just 8 months after Athena's birth. Christina, desperate to keep the marriage alive, went so far as to financially support Thierry and even proposed a shared arrangement with Landhage. But these efforts were in vain. The divorce was finalized in 1987, but the complex and troubled relationship between Christina and Thierry continued until her death in 1988. It was within this tragic set of circumstances, despite being raised into immense wealth, that one Athena Onassis would grow up. Athena Onassis was born on the 29th of January 1985 in the American Hospital of Paris, located in Neuilly-sur-Seine, France. And from the moment she took her first breath, she was the living continuation of a legacy steeped in wealth and power, as she was the only heir of Aristotle Onassis. Yet Athena's early years were shadowed by misfortune and complications that would shape her life in ways few could imagine. As mentioned previously, her parents' marriage was filled with problems, yet Athena, oblivious to the adult chaos surrounding her, was baptized on Scorpios, the island that symbolized her family's immense fortune and influence. Then, at the tender age of 3, Athena's life took a cruel turn. Her mother, Christina Onassis, passed away suddenly in November 1988, the victim of pulmonary edema. This tragic event left Athena as the last direct link to the Onassis fortune, an inheritance that would later place her among the wealthiest young women in the world. With Christina gone, the responsibility of raising Athena fell to her father, Thierry Roussel, who had by then committed himself to Gaby Landhage, the woman who had once been his mistress and was now his wife. As she grew, Athena's existence was a peculiar mix of unimaginable wealth and efforts at a normal childhood. The family settled in Lucy-sur-Morge, Switzerland, where she attended school, mingling with other children who had no idea of the empire that awaited her. But Roussel, perhaps in an effort to shield her from the corrupting influence of too much money too soon, ensured that Athena received no more pocket money than her half-siblings. Indeed, it was a curious upbringing for a girl who one day would control a fortune that spanned continents. Her education was carefully curated, leading her to a preparatory course in Brussels, Belgium, and it was here that she faced the challenge of the baccalaureate exam, which she successfully passed in the summer of 2003. But Brussels offered more than just academic pursuits. It was in this city that Athena discovered a passion that would become central to her life: equestrian sports. Horses, with their grace and power, captivated her, providing a rare avenue for expression and escape from the pressures of her inheritance. Yet, through these formative years, the Onassis fortune, so vast and intricate, was not hers to control. You see, Christina Onassis always held a certain distrust towards Thierry Roussel, the man her daughter would one day call father. In fact, she saw him as a potential threat, a man whose ambitions could easily veer off course. And to guard against any unwanted surprises, she had the family wealth placed under the watchful eyes of a board of administrators, a group she handpicked herself. The chosen trustees were Stelio Papadimitriou, Paul Ioannidis, Apostolos Zabelas, and Theodore Gabrielides, men who understood the seriousness of their duty. As young Athena grew up, every penny spent in her name required the board's nod of approval. Certainly, it was a system that grated on Father Roussel's nerves, so much so that he once threatened to pack his bags and head back to France, where the estate's tax obligations would have been far steeper. And though she was only 13, Athena already felt a deep resentment towards anything related to her Greek heritage. In one of her rare interviews, she confessed to an Italian magazine that she believed the Onassis name was the root of all her troubles. Then, her stepmother, Gaby Landhage, confirmed this sentiment during an appearance on American television, recounting how Athena had once said that if she could, she would burn every last dollar of the Onassis fortune. Yet on her 18th birthday, Athena assumed control of her portion of her mother, Christina Onassis' estate, estimated to be worth between $700 million and $1 billion, instantly making her one of the wealthiest individuals in the world. However, another battle began after she turned 21 in 2006, when her lawyers attempted and failed to secure her position as president of the Onassis Foundation. In fact, the board was unyielding, deeming her unqualified and asserting that she had no legitimate claim to Aristotle Onassis's estate. They cited her lack of connection to Greek culture, unfamiliarity with the language, absence of formal education, and complete lack of work experience as evidence of her unsuitability. They even invoked the memory of her late uncle Alexander, arguing that Athena had little in common with the legacy left by her grandfather. Yet, despite the intense legal battles and challenges Athena Onassis faced in her quest to become president of the Onassis Foundation after her 21st birthday, she did receive the remainder of her inheritance at that time. And regarding romance, around the same time, in March 2003, Onassis found herself drawn to Álvaro de Miranda Neto, a Brazilian showjumper with 2 Olympic medals to his name. The relationship quickly grew serious, and she made the move to São Paulo, purchasing a luxurious duplex with sweeping views of Ibirapuera Park for $8.6 million. By December 2005, the two were married in a ceremony brimming with Brazilian VIPs and equestrian friends. Yet, absent were her father and stepmother. The couple, suspiciously uninterested in extravagant gifts, encouraged their guests to make charitable donations instead. But the marriage didn't last. By 2016, the couple had separated following allegations of infidelity on Miranda's part, and the ensuing divorce was swift and complex, with Onassis securing the services of the formidable lawyer Robert Stephen Cohen. Legal battles spilled into the courts of Antwerp, Belgium, where Onassis had been living. Miranda contested the prenuptial agreement and demanded alimony, while disputes over the ownership of their horses added further complications. The divorce was finally settled in November 2017, and Onassis returned to Greece to start anew. Yet, despite the personal turmoil, Athena remained steadfast in her pursuit of equestrian excellence. Indeed, she had been a competitive showjumper since childhood, and in 2001 she claimed second place in an event in Jerez, Spain. Competing under the Greek flag for the Avlona Riding Club in Athens, she continued to make her mark. Even a spinal injury in 2012 couldn't keep her from representing Greece in the European Show Jumping Championships in 2013 and the World Championships in 2014. Therefore, Athena Onassis has carved out her own space in the world of equestrian sports, not just as a competitor, but also as a patron. The Athena Onassis International Horse Show, established in 2007 in São Paulo, eventually found its home on the glamorous shores of Pampelon Beach in Saint-Tropez by 2014. The horse breeding and training business she co-owned with her former husband in Belgium, AD Sport Horses, continued to operate, a lasting symbol of her enduring connection to the sport. In the rarefied world of fashion, few names evoke as much flair as Versace. Indeed, this brand, so representative of hedonistic luxury, unapologetic glamour, and audacious creativity, has secured an enduring place on the global stage. Yet, beyond the iconic designs and gilded runways lies a complex tale steeped in family drama, tragedy, and a delicate balance of power. At the heart of this saga is Allegra Versace, an heiress to an inheritance of over $800 million, who was thrust into a world of immense wealth and legacy, yet burdened by a deep reluctance to fully embrace her runway-filled destiny. Thus, in today's episode, we'll explore how, after Allegra inherited a staggering 9-figure fortune at just 18 years old, her life has been defined not by the wealth and status that surrounded her, but a complex struggle with her mother and beyond, as we describe, when $800 million can't save an heiress, the Allegra Versace story. Allegra Versace Beck came into the world dripping in designer labels and generational wealth. Indeed, with a last name that practically screams fashion royalty, Allegra's path was already paved in silk and gold before she could even walk in high heels. Specifically, as the daughter of Donatella Versace, fashion's grande dame, and American model Paul Beck, Allegra is the niece to the legendary Gianni Versace. And that's the kind of gene pool the rest of us can only dream about. Now, at just 11 years old, life handed Allegra an inheritance most of us wouldn't even know how to spend in several lifetimes, as her late uncle Gianni, in his will, ensured that a cool 50% of the Versace empire became hers. Thus, by 2023, her wealth had ballooned to an eye-watering $900 million. Now, you'd think with that kind of cash and such a storied name, she'd be front row at every couture show and sipping champagne with the A-listers. But no, Allegra prefers the quiet life, shunning the spotlight her last name so effortlessly attracts. Apparently, she's the rare billionaire who doesn't scream it from the rooftops, opting instead for a quieter, more reserved existence miles away from the red carpets and paparazzi frenzy. Then there's Mother Donatella, the queen of reinvention herself. After Gianni's murder, she didn't just keep the Versace brand alive, she turned it into a global juggernaut, and as of 2024, she's sitting on a $400 million fortune. But in Mama's case, every penny of that is earned. Indeed, she's been the creative force driving Versace to new heights while also serving as the group's vice president. That kind of empire building is not for the faint of heart, but then again, neither is her lifestyle. Take Villa Mondadori, Donatella's 15,000 square foot playground perched beside Lake Maggiore. Purchased for a neat $5.6 million, it's the kind of home you could get lost in for days. 20 bedrooms, 12 bathrooms, and enough space to throw the kind of lavish parties that have seen the likes of Walt Disney and Ernest Hemingway swanning around. Furthermore, its proximity to Lake Como, where Gianni once owned a villa, only adds another layer to the Versace family's deep-rooted connection to Italy, wealth, and style. And yet, with a mother living at that level of style and a personal net worth double that, you're probably wondering why Allegra Versace has opted to stay out of the limelight, in stark contrast to other family members. To get our answer, let's flip over to the next chapter and give you the broader, gold-gilded context. To fully grasp Allegra Versace's place within this unfolding story, we must explore the complex history of her uncle, Gianni Versace, the creative genius who reshaped the fashion world. Born on the 2nd of December 1946 in Reggio Calabria, Italy, Gianni was more than a designer. He was a creator of spectacle, a man who elevated fashion into an art form that embodied the excesses and glamour of an era. And his designs, daring and exuberant, adorned everyone from Hollywood superstars like Madonna and Princess Diana to European aristocracy, making the Versace label synonymous with luxury. But Gianni's rise in the fashion world began humbly, shaped by his early exposure to the craft through his mother, a dressmaker in their small town. This environment fostered Gianni's interest in fashion from a young age, as he spent much of his childhood surrounded by fabrics and the art of tailoring. Therefore, his mother played a significant role in shaping his understanding of the craft, instilling in him a deep appreciation for quality and detail that would later define his designs. Now, Gianni's sister, Donatella Versace, was born on the 2nd of May 1955 and shared a similar upbringing. Like Gianni, she was influenced by their mother's dressmaking business, and Donatella often described herself as the best-dressed little girl in the city, thanks to her brother's creations. Gianni would often make outfits for Donatella, and she became a key figure in his life, both personally and professionally. Thus, the bond between Gianni and Donatella was strong and dynamic. As children, Gianni would take Donatella out with him, even sneaking her to discos, much to their mother's dismay. This close relationship continued into adulthood, with Donatella becoming Gianni's muse and confidant. Therefore, when Gianni moved to Milan in 1972 to pursue his fashion career, Donatella frequently visited him, offering her insights and critiques as he established himself in the industry. Soon, Gianni's career took off in Milan, where his unique style quickly garnered attention, and by 1978 he launched his own brand, Versace, which became synonymous with luxury and bold design. There, his collections were known for their vibrant colors, daring prints, and innovative use of materials such as leather and metal, which challenged the conventional norms of fashion. Therefore, Versace's designs were not just clothing, they were artistic statements that celebrated individuality and self-expression. Soon, Donatella played a crucial role in the growth of the Versace brand. Initially working behind the scenes, she became more involved as Gianni's trusted advisor and muse, and her influence was instrumental in shaping the brand's image, particularly through her work on the Versace line in the 1980s. Indeed, Donatella's flair for drama and celebrity connections helped elevate Versace's fashion shows into grand spectacles that blended art, music, and high fashion. Consequently, Versace creations weren't merely clothing. They were statements, and their fashion shows turned into dazzling theatrical events, blending art, celebrity, and music into a spectacle that captivated the world. Thus, at the height of his powers, Gianni was a fashion monarch, ruling from his lavish homes, including the now iconic Casa Casuarina in Miami Beach. Yet, it was outside this very mansion that Gianni's life was tragically cut short on the 15th of July, 1997. His murder sent shockwaves across the globe, and the glamorous world Gianni had constructed suddenly collapsed into grief. But his death wasn't just the end of a life, but a devastating blow to the fashion empire he had built, leaving his family reeling and unsure of how to preserve the legacy that had made him a household name. Casa Casuarina, once a monument to Gianni's success, quickly became forever linked to the tragedy that robbed the world of one of its brightest creative forces. In the aftermath, Donatella Versace, Gianni's younger sister, was thrust into the spotlight as the new creative head of the brand, while also grappling with raising an 11-year-old daughter named Allegra. In the wake of Gianni Versace's tragic death in 1997, Donatella Versace, his younger sister, faced the formidable challenge of taking over the creative reins of the iconic fashion brand. But having been a crucial part of Versace's creative process for years, Donatella was intimately familiar with the brand's aesthetic and ethos. Yet, stepping into her brother's shoes was anything but easy. The fashion world watched as Donatella navigated the precarious task of honoring Gianni's vision while infusing her own flair into the collections, a balance that would define her legacy. But Donatella wasn't alone in this transition. Her daughter, Allegra Versace, then just a child, was poised to play a critical role in the family empire. You see, Gianni had named Allegra as the heir to half of his massive fortune in his will, though she was only 11 years old when her uncle died, much too young to fully grasp the monumental future that awaited her. Yet, growing up in the shadow of one of fashion's most glamorous dynasties, Allegra's life was surrounded by both privilege and immense pressure. Regarding Allegra's parents, Mother Donatella married Paul Beck, a former Versace model, in 1983, and their marriage, although seemingly orchestrated by Gianni himself, intertwined deeply with the Versace family dynamics. Gianni was close to both Donatella and her husband, and while there were rumors that Gianni had a romantic interest in Beck, Beck denied any such relationship. Despite these rumors, Donatella and Paul Beck maintained a partnership both personally and professionally until their separation in 2000, by which time Beck had shifted into a role as a communications consultant for the company. Thus, Allegra's childhood was one of guarded privilege, growing up in the luxurious backdrop of Milan. She attended the British School of Milan, ensuring her education remained a priority despite the chaos surrounding her family. Yet it was evident from a young age that Allegra was a more private figure, in contrast to the public persona her mother cultivated. She later pursued studies at Brown University in Rhode Island and UCLA in California, diving into subjects such as French, art history, and theatre. This focus on academics and personal development underscored her desire to craft a life beyond the Versace brand. But, despite her efforts to carve out a quieter existence, the weight of Allegra's inheritance loomed large. At 18, Allegra officially inherited half of Gianni's estate, an eye-watering fortune estimated to be worth approximately $800 million US. Literally, overnight, she became one of the wealthiest young women in the world. But with such an immense inheritance came heavy expectations, and Allegra's life remained deeply intertwined with the future of Versace. Now, despite this instant wealth and the significant role she was poised to play in the fashion world, Allegra chose a path far removed from the glitzy realm of fashion and celebrity that defined her family's legacy. Unlike her mother, Donatella Versace, who thrived in the limelight with her bold style and commanding presence, Allegra retreated into a quieter existence, focusing on her studies and maintaining a low profile. You see, Donatella, with her flamboyant persona, embraced the challenge of steering the Versace brand through the turbulent waters of a rapidly changing fashion industry. Under her stewardship, Versace not only survived but also reinvented itself, ensuring its place as a powerhouse in the fashion world. On the other side, the pressure of living up to a legacy as monumental as Gianni's took its toll on Allegra. As she grappled with the expectations placed upon her, she faced an internal conflict about whether she even wanted the role that came with her inheritance. This personal turmoil became publicly visible in the mid-2000s when her battle with anorexia became widely known. Photographs of her frail figure sparked concern and speculation, and the media quickly turned her private pain into a very public ordeal. Furthermore, while Allegra Versace confronted her personal struggles, her mother, Donatella Versace, faced her own battles with substance abuse. Specifically, her addiction began in her early 30s, a time when the pressures of the fashion industry and the unexpected responsibility of leading the Versace brand after her brother Gianni's murder weighed heavily on her. Despite the chaos in her personal life, Donatella's professional triumphs were remarkable, as she successfully led the Versace brand through challenging times, ensuring its continued success and relevance in the fashion industry. Then, the turning point came in 2004, when Donatella checked into a rehabilitation facility following an intervention by her friend, Sir Elton John. This decision was crucial not only for her health, but also for the future of the Versace brand. Her willingness to confront her addiction was seen as a positive step towards stabilizing the company, which was dealing with financial difficulties at the time. Observers noted that her commitment to recovery could strengthen the brand, making it more attractive to potential partners and investors. Even more positively, at age 24, Allegra decided she was ready to help build the empire. She began participating in the operations of Gianni Versace S.p.A., eventually joining the board of directors in the year 2011. Little did the world know that the addition of Allegra would help propel the brand to unseen heights. In 2014, the Versace family made a significant move by selling a 20% stake in the company to the private equity firm Blackstone Group. The deal valued the fashion house at $1.4 billion, signaling a deliberate effort to fuel expansion and innovation. But this decision was not solely about securing financial backing. It was a carefully crafted strategy to amplify Versace's global influence. And the infusion of capital was intended to finance the opening of flagship stores in major cities across the globe and regain control over the brand's licensed products, which had grown to encompass a large segment of the business. This pivotal move allowed Versace to streamline its operations and strengthen its grip on its identity as a leading luxury brand. Despite the sale, Allegra and Donatella Versace held onto their stakes in the company, demonstrating their enduring dedication to maintaining control over the brand that had been a symbol of their family's legacy. And the results of the Blackstone partnership were striking. The brand saw a marked increase in its presence, establishing new flagship stores in key fashion capitals, such as New York, Paris, and Shanghai. These openings not only expanded Versace's footprint, but also solidified its position in the luxury sector, placing it in the heart of thriving fashion markets. Then in 2018, another transformative chapter unfolded for Versace when Michael Kors Holdings, which later rebranded as Capri Holdings, acquired the company for approximately $2.2 billion. This acquisition marked a historic turning point, offering Versace the opportunity to scale new heights under the management of a larger conglomerate. The decision to sell a majority stake in the company was thus meticulously weighed, as the family sought to balance the need for growth with the preservation of the Versace legacy. Importantly, Allegra, Donatella, and their family retained a substantial stake in Capri Holdings, ensuring they continued to have a significant influence over the brand's future. Therefore, this arrangement allowed them to remain at the helm of Versace's creative and strategic decisions, guiding its evolution while remaining faithful to its roots. Therefore, Allegra Versace's life, along with that of her mother, reflects the tension between immense wealth and personal challenges as she navigated the pressures of a legendary family name on her own terms. Her story isn't just about fashion or fortune, it's about finding balance in a world that never stops watching. Imagine your life at the very pinnacle of power and prestige in the lovingly innovative and forward-thinking culture of South Korea. Of course, we're not talking about strutting your dance moves as a member of legendary boy band BTS, or being an award-winning star in media properties like Squid Game or Best Picture winner Parasite, although those would be nice. We're talking about a life as South Korean old money where you wake up and check your Samsung phone before heading downstairs to do your laundry in your Samsung washing machine. You turn on your Samsung TV to watch the news hosted in a skyscraper built by Samsung. You live and breathe in a world dominated by this brand. And, with the way this company's grown over the last half-century, even when you die, you'll be buried in a Samsung coffin. Better yet, we want you to imagine that you're the heir of this iconic global behemoth. The last place you'd want to, and expect to, end up is in a jail cell. And yet, that's exactly what happened along the way to the Lee family of South Korea's $370 billion empire. In today's episode, we'll share with you the full saga of the founding family of Samsung, from rags to riches to jail to more riches, as we describe. The Lee family, the $370 billion family that owns South Korea. Lee Jae-yong, the suave executive chairman of Samsung, or chaebol for those in the know, isn't just a business tycoon, he's a walking, talking emblem of Asian affluence. With a net worth bobbing around the $9 to $11 billion mark, Lee's not just rich, he's look up and see my bank balance in the stars rich. And his golden goose is, of course, a cozy 2% stake in Samsung as of January 2024. Not too shabby for a day's work. Now, looking to the luxurious life of this billionaire, Lee's not one to overtly flaunt his assets, but let's just say his entry into any room is nothing short of a red carpet affair. Private jets, limos with windows so tinted you'd think they lead to another universe, and suits so sharp they could probably cut glass. That's just a Tuesday for him. And when he's not making business moves, you'll find him perfecting his golf swing or trotting around equestrian stables. Because why not? Naturally, we can't forget his real estate game, which is as strong as the camera quality on the latest phones he makes billions from every day. In 2014, he casually dropped a cool $45 million on a Madison Avenue pad in New York. Add to that properties in London and Seoul, and you've got yourself a global monopoly board. But wait, there's his sister, Lee Boo-jin, sitting pretty with a net worth of $3.7 billion as well. Indeed, she's not just one of the country's richest women, she's a diamond-encrusted powerhouse in her own right. Her rise to riches was punctuated by a journey through the Samsung empire, climbing the ladder all the way to the top at Hotel Schiller, and her lifestyle is equal to Lee Jae-yong's luxury level, but then add a sprinkle of extra extravagance. She's seldom seen without a Bulgari watch that's worth more than most people's homes, and her art collection is diversified as the electronics division in her family's very own multi-billion-dollar empire. Therefore, from the outside, the Samsung family is the very definition of luxury, wealth and influence, and it's like they've got a VIP pass to life itself. But how did this empire sprout from the ground? To understand the roots of this opulent family tree, we need to time travel back to the dawn of the Common Era, where a legendary story of astronomical wealth begins. In the intricate landscape of South Korean history, the Lee family name, or Yi in its original form, emerges as a significant pillar. Tracing its origins to the Gyeongju clan, which was established at the dawn of the Common Era, the clan system in South Korea presents a fascinating study. Unlike the Scottish clans, known for their tartan-clad warriors and rugged Highland territories, or the intricate tribal systems of Japan, marked by their strict social hierarchies and samurai codes, the Korean clan system is distinguished by its unique combination of ancestral reverence, regional ties, and social stratification. And the Gyeongju clan, from which Samsung's Lee family descends, boasts a staggering membership of over 1.4 million individuals. And King Yuri, around the year 9 CE, marked a pivotal moment in this clan's history by conferring the name Yi upon his subjects, a name that, through centuries, has evolved into Lee in modern translation. Thus, the Lee surname, riding the waves of time, has become one of the most prevalent in South Korea, only surpassed by one other in terms of popularity. Therefore, outside of the Samsung founders in Korean history, we can find many notable figures hailing from the Gyeongju clan. These luminaries have painted various sectors with their brilliance, from arts to politics, adding layers of richness to the family's legacy. However, the story of Lee Byung-chul, the founding father of Samsung, adds a particularly golden hue to this already impressive lineage. Born not into the struggles of poverty, but into the comforts of substantial wealth, his story begins in the South Gyeongsang province of the then Korean Empire. Indeed, we can picture the South Gyeongsang province at the turn of the century, a period marked by the ebb and flow of traditional Korean culture and the impending tides of modernization. Certainly, it was an era when Korea stood at the crossroads of its own deep-rooted heritage and the looming shadows of external influences. In this historical juncture, in February 1910, Byung-chul entered the world as the youngest of 4 siblings, destined to leave an indelible mark on the business world. From a tender age, education was the beacon that guided Byung-chul's early journey. His academic voyage began at Jungdong High School in Seoul and later led him to the shores of Tokyo, where he enrolled at Waseda University. However, the halls of academia could not contain his burgeoning entrepreneurial spirit for long. Byung-chul soon realized that his true calling lay not in the pursuit of scholarly accolades, but in the vibrant arena of business. With a decision that would set the stage for a remarkable career, Byung-chul turned his back on Waseda University, choosing instead to carve his own path in the world of commerce. Thus, with the boldness of a pioneer and the legacy of centuries coursing through his veins, the entrepreneurial chapter of Lee Byung-chul's life commenced. In 1938, a pivotal year in South Korea's commercial saga, Lee Byung-chul embarked on a venture that would redefine the business landscape of the nation. Founding the Samsung Trading Company in Busan on the 1st of March, he ventured into a domain that was both challenging and promising. Now, the 30s and 40s in South Korea were periods rife with economic transformations. The country, still grappling with the vestiges of Japanese occupation and the stirrings of modern industry, presented a fertile ground for businesses that could bridge the gap between traditional commerce and the emerging demands of a modernizing society. In this context, a grocery transportation company seemed a strategic choice for Byung-chul, catering to the essential needs of a population on the cusp of change. Now, with an initial investment of 30,000 won, roughly equivalent to $25, Byung-chul demonstrated his business acumen in an era when such a sum represented a significant financial commitment. And his approach to growing Samsung Trading Co. was a masterclass in entrepreneurial agility and foresight. In a span of just 7 years, he transformed the company from a modest operation into a significant player in the national market. This rapid expansion can be attributed to his keen understanding of the evolving Korean market, his ability to forge pivotal business relationships, and a relentless pursuit of diversification and innovation in business practices. By 1945, Samsung Trading Company had expanded its operations across the country, becoming a prominent name in the transportation of produce. This success prompted Byung-chul to relocate to Seoul in 1947, seeking new horizons in the nation's capital. However, in 1950, the burgeoning trajectory of Samsung and the fate of South Korea took a dramatic turn with the outbreak of the Korean War. The conflict, rooted in the deep-seated ideological divide between the communist North and the capitalist South, escalated following the North's invasion of the South, and this geopolitical upheaval was a stark manifestation of the Cold War tensions, fracturing the Korean peninsula and its people. Consequently forced to move back to Busan due to the conflict, Byung-chul faced a daunting challenge. Yet, in the turmoil of war, he discovered unexpected opportunities. The influx of American soldiers, part of the United States' effort to support South Korea against the North's aggression, created a new market dynamic, and the presence of these foreign troops, with their distinct needs and consumption patterns, opened new avenues for Samsung Trading Company. Byung-chul adeptly capitalized on this situation, adapting his business to cater to this new clientele. Therefore, the war years, while a period of great hardship for many, paradoxically proved to be a boon for Samsung Trading Company, as the company played a crucial role in meeting the increased demand for goods and services, thereby solidifying its position in the Korean economy. In the aftermath of the Korean War, Lee Byung-chul, with visionary zeal, steered Samsung into the realm of textiles, recognizing the pivotal role this sector could play in Korea's economic resurgence. This strategic expansion marked the beginning of a phenomenal growth trajectory for Samsung, transforming it from a national contender into a global powerhouse. And the 1960s heralded a period of diversification and acquisition under Byung-chul's leadership. His astute business strategies led to the acquisition of multiple insurance companies, a department store, an oil refinery, and a nylon company. Subsequently, this period of aggressive expansion underlined Samsung's ambition to become a conglomerate with a varied portfolio, a goal that was rapidly becoming a reality. Then, 1969 was a watershed year for Samsung as it ventured into the electronics industry. The establishment of its first electronic divisions and the subsequent production of black and white televisions marked Samsung's foray into what would become its flagship sector. And the success was immediate and staggering. Samsung soon became the world's largest producer of black and white televisions. Concurrently, other subsidiaries began to manufacture home appliances, which quickly garnered acclaim within Korea for their quality and innovation. Furthermore, during this era of expansion and success, Byung-chul's son, Lee Kun-hee, started to show a keen interest in the family business. Fresh from his studies at George Washington University, Kun-hee was groomed by his father, learning the intricate realities of steering a company as dynamic and successful as Samsung. Then, the 1980s saw Byung-chul relentlessly driving Samsung's evolution into a technological titan. Under his guidance, the company branched out into semiconductors, electronics, aerospace, and in 1985, the establishment of Samsung Data Systems marked its entry into the information technology sector. These bold moves laid the groundwork for Samsung's future as a global leader in technology and innovation. But then, in 1987, the visionary founder of Samsung, Lee Byung-chul, passed away at the age of 77. At the time of his passing, his estimated net worth was around $35 million, equal to roughly 94 million today, standing as a symbol of his extraordinary ability to turn a modest investment into a multi-million-dollar empire. But Byung-chul's legacy extends far beyond his personal wealth. He was instrumental in the rebirth and growth of Korea's post-war economy, playing a crucial role in the nation's industrial and technological advancements. His life's work, Samsung, not only revolutionized business practices in Korea, but also set new benchmarks in global corporate leadership. However, in order to enter into truly old money territory, the Lee family would need their second generation of heirs to not only match Daddy's performance, but actually outdo the patriarch. Let's see in the next chapter of They Succeeded. In the wake of Lee Byung-chul's passing, a significant restructuring took place within the Samsung empire, and the conglomerate was divided into 5 distinct entities, reflecting a strategic decision to diversify and specialize. First, Lee Kun-hee, Byung-chul's son, assumed control of Samsung Electronics, a move that would herald a new era for the company. His siblings, meanwhile, took charge of the remaining divisions, each carving their own path in the expansive Samsung landscape. And under Lee Kun-hee's stewardship, Samsung Electronics was poised for a transformation. Kun-hee perceived the company, as it stood, to be in a state of stagnation, a stark contrast to its dynamic and innovative beginnings. And this perception was not without basis. Despite its size and reach, Samsung had become mired in a comfort zone, with its strategies and products reflecting a reluctance to venture beyond familiar territories and challenge existing paradigms. Thus, determined to elevate Samsung Electronics to a global stature, Lee Kun-hee embarked on a radical overhaul. He identified a core issue, a cultural inertia within Korean corporate society that hindered innovation and discouraged dissenting opinions. To break this mold, Kun-hee introduced a new management philosophy, encouraging open dialogue, critical thinking, and a departure from the hierarchical norms that stifled creativity and risk-taking. Furthermore, Kun-hee's emphasis on quality over quantity marked a significant shift from the prevailing industry norms. Rather than churning out a plethora of products, he focused on refining a select few, ensuring they surpassed international standards. This strategy was thus not just about competing, it was about setting new benchmarks in quality and innovation. Therefore, the late 80s and 90s saw Samsung Electronics expand its footprint globally, with new manufacturing plants sprouting from England to Texas. This expansion was complemented by a foray into diverse technological ventures, including automobile manufacturing and the acquisition of international companies like Lux and Reli. Soon, Kun-hee's aggressive expansion tactics bore fruit. By 1995, Samsung Electronics' revenue soared to $87 billion, accounting for a significant portion of South Korea's GDP. Yet, success often walks hand in hand with controversy. In 1996, Lee Kun-hee's leadership came under scrutiny following allegations of political bribery linked to then-President Roh Tae-woo. Accused of engaging in corrupt practices, Kun-hee faced a 2-year prison sentence. However, the sentence was initially suspended and subsequently, Kun-hee received a political pardon from President Kim Young-sam. But this episode, while a blemish on his career, did not detract from the monumental impact Lee Kun-hee had on transforming Samsung Electronics, and by extension, South Korea's presence in the global technological arena. His vision and relentless pursuit of excellence propelled Samsung into an era of unprecedented growth and innovation, firmly establishing it as a titan in the global market. Next, during the next decades, Samsung not only weathered the storm of the Asian financial crisis, but also emerged as a leader in the global technology market. The crisis, which swept through Asia from July 1997 to December 1998, tested the mettle of many Asian conglomerates. Samsung, under Kun-hee's guidance, navigated these turbulent times with strategic foresight, strengthening its position in the global economy. And a key milestone in Samsung's journey was the launch of the first Galaxy smartphone in the early 2000s. This product swiftly gained acclaim worldwide, catapulting Samsung into a major player in the smartphone market. In parallel, 2006 marked another triumph for the company as it ascended to the position of the top-selling television manufacturer. These successes were emblematic of Samsung's growing dominance and its ability to innovate and adapt to changing market dynamics. However, the sheen of these achievements was dulled in 2008 when Lee Kun-hee again faced serious legal challenges. He was found guilty of tax evasion, a charge that led to fines exceeding $80 million and a 3-year prison sentence. Similar to the past, Kun-hee was pardoned, reflecting a complex interplay of business, politics, and law in South Korea. This legal debacle resulted in Kun-hee temporarily stepping down as chairman of Samsung Electronics in 2008. But Kun-hee's hiatus from the helm of Samsung was short-lived. He returned to the leadership position in 2010, demonstrating his obsessive commitment to the company's growth and innovation. Under his renewed leadership, Samsung continued to expand its technological footprint, delving into new products such as tablets and smartwatches. However, in 2014, Lee Kun-hee's health took a turn for the worse when he suffered a heart attack, leading him to step down from his active leadership role. He retained the title of chairman but passed the baton of day-to-day management to his son, Lee Jae-yong, who took on the role of de facto director. This transition marked a new chapter in Samsung's history, one that would be navigated by the now third generation of the iconic Lee family. Unfortunately, rather than righting the family ship back on course in the legal realm, more criminal trouble would soon be afoot for the Lees. Lee Jae-yong's tenure at the helm of Samsung has been mired in legal controversies, casting a shadow over the tech giant's impressive achievements, and the most significant of these controversies erupted in 2017, revealing a tangled web of bribery and corruption. Central to this scandal was the revelation that Lee Jae-yong had bribed South Korea's former president, Park Geun-hye. Among various illicit transactions, the most striking, perhaps, was the embezzlement of company funds to purchase an $800,000 horse for Park's daughter. Lee Jae-yong initially served a year of his prison sentence before it was suspended. However, this respite was short-lived as, in January 2021, his sentence was reinstated, leading to another 6 months behind bars before he was granted a presidential pardon. Shockingly, the legal woes for Lee Jae-yong did not end there. In the same year, he faced conviction and a fine of $59,000 for using the illegal sedative propofol. His defense, citing stress relief, failed to sway the court's judgment. Furthermore, allegations surfaced in 2023 linking Lee to a $3.9 billion accounting fraud scandal dating back to 2015, with prosecutors accusing him of manipulating stock prices of 2 Samsung subsidiaries, a move aimed at consolidating his control over the conglomerate. While prosecutors sought a 5-year imprisonment, the outcome of this case remained pending at the time of this report. Despite these tumultuous legal challenges, Samsung Electronics' business performance has remained robust. In the third quarter of 2023, the company held a significant 19.4% market share in the smartphone industry, trailing only behind Apple. Moreover, Samsung has laid out ambitious plans for the future, focusing on integrating advanced AI models into its upcoming generations of smartphones and electronics. Lee Jae-yong continues to steer Samsung even as he faces the possibility of further jail time, and this juxtaposition of business success and personal legal strife paints a complex picture of the Samsung dynasty. On the surface, the company's achievements and market dominance depict a tale of triumph and innovation. However, a deeper examination reveals a less pristine narrative, marked by legal entanglements and ethical questions, much like almost any old money family we've investigated on this channel.
Baby Hugh Grosvenor at just under £9, he'll become an instant billionaire when he takes his father's title. But the Duke, a keen football player in his youth, admitted he'd like his heir to play for England.
We can live in hope.
On a radiant June morning, Chester Cathedral stood resplendent as the site of the grand union between Hugh Grosvenor, the 7th Duke of Westminster, and Olivia Henson. Guests of distinguished lineage and close friends, including Prince William and Princess Eugenie, filled the cathedral, their presence underscoring the significance of this union. As Hugh, in a sharp mourning suit and pink tie, stood at the altar, his eyes reflected a blend of tradition and new beginnings. Olivia dazzled with a serene smile in her bespoke ivory gown, adorned with intricate floral embroidery. Later, the celebration would continue at Eaton Hall, the Grosvenor family estate, where lavish receptions were prepared to honour the newlyweds. And as the sun set over the majestic country home, with the celebrations in full swing, you could almost see the comforting presence of Hugh's father, Gerald Grosvenor, the late 6th Duke of Westminster, watching over his son with a contented smile. Indeed, Gerald Grosvenor was one of a kind in a sea of ostentatious British nobility, insofar as we could somewhat confidently call him a modest billionaire or even a relatable rich guy. A man of many facets, Gerald was unexpectedly thrown into the line of succession for his family, then used that adversity to serve his country with distinction before personal demons from his childhood resurfaced. In today's episode, we'll tell his story from the idyllic fields of Northern Ireland to the richest private citizen in Britain, as we describe, the humble aristocrat, Gerald Grosvenor, the 6th Duke of Westminster. During his prime, Gerald Grosvenor, the 6th Duke of Westminster, was seen as a titan of wealth and nobility, towering over most with a bank balance that even made seasoned aristocrats blush. For example, in the very first edition of the Sunday Times Rich List in 1989, he clinched the spot as the second richest person in the UK, amassing a hefty 3.1 billion Great British pounds, a sum that would be worth about 10.1 billion today. And at the time, behind only Queen Elizabeth II herself. in terms of net worth on Albion. Now, his vast fortune stemmed from Grosvenor Estates, a property empire he inherited with his dukedom in 1979, a family business that had been dealing in prime London real estate since the 17th century, starting with a tidy 500 acres in Mayfair and Belgravia. And under Gerald's savvy leadership, Grosvenor Group blossomed, crowning him the UK's wealthiest property developer and among the largest landowners. Indeed, his property empire spread its roots wide, spanning Edinburgh, Liverpool, Oxford, Cambridge, Southampton, and Cheshire. But his influence also reached beyond the UK, gripping other parts of Europe with its expansive portfolio. Furthermore, his stately family seat, Eaton Hall in Cheshire, mirrored the grandeur of his title, boasting opulent architecture and sprawling grounds, epitomizing centuries of aristocratic splendor. Not content with just one lavish estate, in 1980 he snagged the Abbeystead estate in Lancashire, famed for its grouse moor. And Gerald's heart was captured by Natalia Asher Phillips, whom he married in 1978 after a whirlwind encounter at a ball in the legendary Blenheim Palace. Now Natalia, herself born to British aristocracy and descended from the likes of Russian poet Alexander Pushkin and Afro-Russian engineer Abram Ganable, brought her own blue-blooded credentials to the Grosvenor lineage, and she stepped into the role of Duchess, adding philanthropy and winemaking to her aristocratic pursuits. The couple's legacy lives on through their 4 children, most notably the recently wed Hugh Richard Louis Grosvenor, who inherited not just the dukedom, but also the mantle of Britain's youngest billionaire after his father's death, with a net worth of over £10 billion. Yet, despite his towering empire and accolades, life wasn't just grand balls and ledger balances for Gerald Grosvenor, the 6th Duke of Westminster. He was uncharacteristically resentful of the pressures of being an aristocrat, and from his youth he battled personal demons and scandals, including suffering from depression and even, famously, having a nervous breakdown in 1998. However, in order to better understand how the UK's richest private citizen and a born and bred aristocrat could struggle with so much self-doubt that he would fantasize about giving it all away, we must begin with an investigation into his childhood, for that is where we'll likely find our answer.
I don't think the title helps me at all. I think the only advantage of being a duke, it does help in a crowded restaurant when you're trying to get a table.
Gerald Cavendish Grosvenor, the future 6th Duke of Westminster, was born on the 22nd of December 1951 in County Tyrone, Northern Ireland. Now, for the uninitiated, his birth in Northern Ireland was not coincidental, but a direct result of his family's established roots on an island in the middle of Lower Lough Erne, and this location was chosen due to his father, Robert Grosvenor, the 5th Duke of Westminster's dual commitments to farming and his political role as a Unionist Member of Parliament for Fermanagh and South Tyrone from 1955 to 1964. And Gerald's mother, Viola Lyttelton, was notably the daughter of the 9th Viscount Cobham, further entrenching the family's noble lineage. Raised in the verdant landscapes of Northern Ireland, Gerald's childhood was infused with pastoral beauty and a semblance of freedom, which he fondly equated to the spirited adventures depicted in Swallows and Amazons. However, this serene childhood underwent a significant shift when, at the tender age of 7, he was sent to Sunningdale School in Ascot, England, subsequently continuing his education at Harrow School. And the stark contrast between his free-spirited life in bucolic Ireland and the rigid discipline of English boarding schools proved to be a challenging transition. Therefore, the early period of Gerald's life was marred not only by the rigours of a new educational system, but also by the personal challenges of facing bullying due to his pronounced Irish accent. Then the situation was further exacerbated by the death of his uncle, the 4th Duke of Westminster, in 1967, which prematurely designated Gerald's father as his successor to become the 5th Duke of Westminster. And this, both consequently and unexpectedly, put Gerald firmly in line to inherit the title. He thus came into the line of succession by chance, arguably, or rotten bad luck, as he put it. Therefore, this succession, coupled with the emotional toll of bullying, impacted his academic focus, resulting in his completion of schooling with only modest qualifications in history and English. Yet, despite these educational setbacks, Gerald found a new direction in 1970 when he joined the Territorial Army, setting the stage for a notable military career that would eventually see him attaining the rank of Major General. The military thus not only offered him a fresh start, but also a chance to earn distinctions on his own merit, relatively independent of his aristocratic heritage. And in 1973, Gerald advanced his military commitment by enrolling in the Royal Military Academy Sandhurst, a prestigious officer training academy in the United Kingdom. Here, he trained to become an officer cadet, a role preparing him for leadership positions in the military. Upon completion of his training, he was commissioned as a second lieutenant in the Territorial and Army Volunteer Reserve, part of the Royal Armoured Corps, specifically the Queen's Own Yeomanry. This unit is a light cavalry regiment known for its flexibility and rapid response capabilities, and his progression was steady and recognized by subsequent promotions, to lieutenant in 1975 and to captain by 1980. His ascent continued with his elevation to the rank of major, first in an acting capacity in 1985, and later confirmed on his birthday in December of the same year. Therefore, Gerald's military tenure was not just a professional obligation, but a transformative experience that offered him both challenges and significant personal growth, shaping him into a figure of notable stature both within and beyond the realms of British aristocracy. And yet, it would be his personal life, even more than his military accomplishments and immense private wealth, that he would become best known for.
Certainly when I was at school, the academic studies came very low down on the list of priorities.
Now, Natalia Aisha Phillips, the future wife of Gerald Grosvenor, who later became known as the Duchess of Westminster, was herself born into a distinguished lineage on the 8th of May 1959. Specifically, she is the youngest daughter of Lieutenant Colonel Harold Pedro Bunny Phillips and Georgina Gina Werner, descending from a mix of British military and European nobility. Notably, her maternal lineage includes Sir Harold Werner, 3rd Baronet, and Countess Anastasia de Torby, a direct descendant of the Russian poet Alexander Pushkin and the Afro-Russian engineer Abram Ganabal. Growing up, Natalia was immersed in the high circles of the British royal family and European aristocracy, thanks to her mother's connections. And these relationships played a pivotal role in her personal life, particularly when her maternal grandmother encouraged her budding relationship with Gerald Grosvenor, a young Earl and future Duke of Westminster, whom she met at a ball at Blenheim Palace in 1977. The romance between Natalia and Gerald quickly escalated to a formal engagement, setting the stage for a grand wedding. Natalia's wedding attire was a creation by designer Sarah Butler, complemented by a historical diamond and spinel tiara, a touching engagement gift from Gerald. But shortly after their marriage, the couple faced a significant life change when Gerald's father passed away, thrusting him into the role of the 6th Duke of Westminster. This transition brought with it the pressure-filled management of one of Britain's largest private estates, including prestigious areas like Eaton Square and large parts of Belgravia. And therefore, the Grosvenor estate, valued in the billions, placed Gerald among the wealthiest individuals in Britain. And in December 1979, the couple welcomed their first child, Lady Tamara Catherine Grosvenor, adding a new dimension of joy to their responsibilities. Natalia balanced her role in high society with significant charitable work, supporting causes such as the Alex Moulton Charitable Trust and the Hospice of the Good Shepherd. Therefore, the early years of their marriage were marked by a blend of high society engagements and the pressures of managing expansive real estate holdings and fulfilling various public roles. Gerald took on numerous responsibilities, serving as president of several organizations, including the Royal National Institute for the Blind and the North of England Zoological Society. Throughout their time together, Natalia and Gerald navigated the complexities of aristocratic life, marked by their significant influence in both societal and business realms. However, lurking beneath, there were numerous psychological and romantic issues that would bubble to the surface for the illustrious 6th Duke of Westminster. By the early 1980s, the personal and psychological struggles of Gerald Grosvenor began to emerge distinctly, marked by a profound internal conflict and exacerbated by the external pressures of his status. You see, Despite his substantial wealth, Grosvenor grappled with a pervasive sense of failure and a debilitating depression. This personal crisis was deepened by his engagement with high-end prostitution services, a revelation that provoked public controversy and added to his psychological burden. And his friends and colleagues often remarked on his sense of entrapment, a sentiment that the very wealth that elevated his public image also constrained him. The dichotomy between his public persona and private turmoil formed a central theme in his life story, illustrating the complexities that often accompany immense wealth and societal expectations. Now, these mounting pressures culminated in a nervous breakdown in 1998, a shocking manifestation of the heavy toll exacted by his roles and the relentless public and media scrutiny. Unfortunately for Gerald, the breakdown was not just a personal crisis, but also a public spectacle, intensifying the scrutiny and discussion surrounding his capacity to manage both his estate and his well-being. And media reports from this period frequently highlighted Grosvenor's struggles with mental health, further complicated by ongoing scandals. And the public's fascination with his lifestyle choices, particularly his secretive engagements with escort services, often overshadowed his business endeavors and philanthropic efforts. For example, his involvement in such activities became widely known in 2007 when he was implicated in a high-profile escort scandal in New York. Known as Client 6, he was revealed to be a patron of the Emperor's Club VIP, the same service utilized by New York Governor Eliot Spitzer. And the ramifications of these revelations were profound. Although Grosvenor managed to preserve his public image to some degree, the damage to his reputation compelled him to resign from his position as Assistant Chief of the Defence Staff, Reserves and Cadets at the British Ministry of Defence. This tumultuous period in Grosvenor's life not only cast a spotlight on his personal difficulties, but also threatened the stability of his familial relationships and his social standing, and his connections to high-profile individuals, including members of the British royal family, only heightened the intensity of the media's interest in his private affairs. As the years progressed, the public and private lives of Gerald Grosvenor remained intricately interwoven, each scandal and personal setback painting a complex portrait of a man caught between the expectations of his status and the realities of his personal demons. However, in his later life, he was able to return to a public-facing glory, most notably through his descendants and the Grosvenor commitment to philanthropy.
I feel an enormous responsibility. I think in my career it's been the most difficult thing in the world to send young men and women off into the unknown, especially when I know what they were going to.
After a 2007 scandal threatened to mar his reputation, Gerald Grosvenor rededicated his life to philanthropy and public service, focusing particularly on supporting the Defence Medical Rehabilitation Centre at Stanford Hall. This facility aids injured members of the British Armed Forces, and Grosvenor's significant donations were crucial in sustaining its mission. And his steadfast support for such initiatives demonstrated his dedication to societal welfare. Moreover, Grosvenor remained actively involved in military service, which had been a respected part of his life. He served as Deputy Commander Land Forces Reserves until 2012, concluding a distinguished 42-year career in the military, and his tenure in the Territorial Army, where he reached the rank of Major General, underscored a career marked by service and honour. In recognition of his contributions, in 2012, Queen Elizabeth II appointed him Commander of the Royal Victorian Order. This honour was a direct acknowledgement from the monarchy, complementing his previous accolades, including Knight of the Garter and Companion of the Order of the Bath. Such distinctions highlighted the restored faith and honour bestowed upon him by the royal family and the public. Grosvenor also concentrated on managing the Grosvenor estate during his later years. His death in 2016 at the age of 64 came unexpectedly after a heart attack, evoking a wave of tributes from the royal family and public figures alike. And Gerald Grosvenor's contributions continue to resonate through his son, Hugh Grosvenor, the 7th Duke of Westminster, who has inherited the responsibility of managing the family's estate and charitable endeavours. In June 2024, Hugh further solidified the family's societal standing through his marriage to Olivia Henson, signalling a new era for the Grosvenor legacy. As he steps into his role, Hugh Grosvenor is poised to perpetuate his father's dedication to philanthropy and prudent estate management. Therefore, throughout his life, Gerald Grosvenor successfully restored his public perception, melding his personal trials with his public and philanthropic undertakings, and legendarily encapsulated the multifaceted nature of his status as a prominent British aristocrat and a regular human being. Imagine you and your sibling grow up knowing that exactly $1 billion awaits you at your 21st birthday. Initially, it sounds like a dream come true. And yet, for the Inman twins, partial heirs to the mammoth Duke tobacco fortune, yes, that Duke family as in Duke University, that billion-dollar inheritance became a personal nightmare. As their father struggled with drug addiction and cycled through marriages, Georgia and Patterson Inman endured horrors that wealth couldn't shield them from. Behind the grand facades of their multiple mansions, the twins faced unthinkable abuse. Forced to play Russian roulette by their nannies, physically tortured in scalding baths, and locked in their rooms at night. Their education was neglected, their development stunted, and their childhood stolen, all while they remained heirs to one of America's greatest fortunes. By the time they reached their anticipated 21st birthday, the twins would discover that even their billion-dollar birthright was more mirage than reality. Therefore, in today's episode of Old Money Luxury, we'll share the shocking true story of how two of America's would-be wealthiest twins became its most pitied heirs. In order to understand both the immense wealth and monumental tragedies of the Inman twins, partial heirs to the colossal Duke family fortune, we must start at the beginning, where the wealth flowed like a river through generations. Yet, unlike the hydroelectric currents that James Buchanan Duke had harnessed to build his empire, this flow of fortune brought not just power, but profound destruction in its wake. The story began in the tobacco fields near Durham, North Carolina, where Duke, born in 1856, transformed a modest leaf trading business into an industrial colossus. By 1890, at merely 33 years old, he assumed the presidency of the American Tobacco Company, his mechanized production methods revolutionizing an entire industry. But tobacco was merely the beginning. Duke's penetrating gaze had fixed upon another source of wealth, the untapped potential of hydroelectric power. In 1904, he established the Southern Power Company, later known as Duke Power Company, extending his influence from the smoky realms of tobacco into the very electrical currents that would power the New South. When his daughter Doris was born in 1912, newspapers heralded her as the richest little girl in the world, a title that carried with it both privilege and burden. The Duke residences rose like American castles. A mansion on Manhattan's Upper East Side, the summer retreat of Rough Point in Newport, and the sprawling expanse of Duke Farms in New Jersey. Yet within these gilded walls, James Duke was planting seeds of paranoia that would flourish long after his death. The inheritance that passed to Doris, estimated at $100 million in trusts, equal to nearly $2 billion today, seemed to carry with it a curse of isolation. She married James H.R. Cromwell in 1935, embarking on a 2-year honeymoon that led them to Hawaii, where they built their sanctuary, Shangri-La. But even paradise could not guarantee happiness. The marriage dissolved during World War II, and a series of high-profile relationships followed, including liaisons with Duke Kahanamoku, Errol Flynn, and General George S. Patton. In 1940, tragedy struck when her only child, a daughter named Arden, lived for just a single day. Yet beneath the surface of this narrative of wealth and loss ran another current, one that would eventually merge with the mainstream of the Duke fortune. Nanaline Holt, the great-grandmother of Georgia and Patterson Inman III, and the woman whose marriages would forge an alliance between the Duke tobacco empire and the Inman fortune, emerged from Macon, Georgia in 1871, her destiny shaped by both the fading gentility of the post-Civil War South and an iron determination that would propel her far beyond her origins. As the daughter of Judge Thaddeus Holt, she possessed not only the expected graces of a Southern belle, but a shrewd understanding of power that would serve her ascent through America's industrial aristocracy. Her first strategic alliance came in 1890, when at 19 she married William H. Inman, an Atlanta cotton merchant whose wealth had weathered the agricultural depression that ruined so many of his contemporaries. Their union produced a son, Walker Patterson Inman in 1894, but William's death in 1902 left Nanaline a young widow, though not for long. Within 5 years, she had secured an even more advantageous marriage to tobacco titan James Buchanan Duke, a union that would fundamentally reshape the trajectory of the Inman line. Walker Patterson Inman Sr., raised in the shadow of his stepfather's empire, embodied the restless energy of America's Jazz Age elite. He pursued modern obsessions, aviation, radio technology, fast cars, with the same intensity that marked his social life. His contribution to the first successful transatlantic shortwave radio broadcast in 1921 demonstrated technical acumen, while his highly publicized 1929 divorce, complete with testimony about Prohibition-era excesses, revealed the darker elements of privilege. Yet Walker Sr. found his footing within the Duke business machinery, serving as both a director of Duke Power Company and a trustee of the Duke Endowment. His second marriage in 1951 produced Walker Patterson Inman Jr., Skipper, born in Florence, South Carolina. But fate dealt the family another blow when Walker Sr. died in 1954, leaving his 2-year-old son to navigate the complexities of inherited wealth without paternal guidance. Skipper's early years foreshadowed the turbulence to come. Orphaned at 10 by his mother's death, he came under the guardianship of his aunt, Doris Duke, whose own complicated relationship with wealth and power offered little stability to her young charge. As he matured, Skipper's life became a study in contrasts. Blessed with enormous financial resources, yet plagued by personal demons, he cycled through marriages and battled persistent substance addiction. Doris Duke's death in 1993 added another $7 million, equivalent to around $15 million a day, to Skipper's considerable fortune. His fourth marriage to Daisha Inman produced twins, Georgia and Walker Patterson III, in 1998. These children, destined to inherit an estimated billion-dollar fortune upon reaching 21, represented both the culmination of their family's extraordinary accumulation of wealth and a new chapter in its troubled dynasty. Their story would prove that vast riches, rather than insulating from life's hardships, often amplified them in ways their ancestors could never have imagined. Born in 1997, Georgia Noel Lahi Inman and Walker Patterson, Inman III entered a world of stark contradictions. By age 4, these heirs to the Duke tobacco fortune, children who would one day inherit nearly $1 billion, struggled with severe speech delays and couldn't grasp the fundamental skill of holding a pencil. Their father, Walker Skipper Patterson Inman Jr., secured sole custody when they were just 2 years old, setting in motion a chain of events that would transform their inheritance into a burden, their childhood into an ordeal. The residences that housed the Inman twins stood as testaments to the facade of wealth. In Wyoming, behind the grand exterior of their estate, the children endured nightly confinement in their rooms, forced to relieve themselves in corners. In South Carolina, another mansion concealed similarly squalid conditions. These weren't merely houses, they were stages where wealth and deprivation played out their grotesque drama. In 2001, Walker Jr. married Darrell Inman, adding another character to the tragic narrative unfolding within these walls. The violence that permeated their daily lives took many forms. Georgia would feel the impact of a baseball bat, Patterson would be pushed downstairs, and their father's own hands would strike Georgia's face. But perhaps most chilling were the actions of their caretakers, nannies who forced the children to play Russian roulette, transforming a game into an instrument of terror. Their education, like every other aspect of their lives, existed in a realm of profound neglect. After second grade, their schooling devolved into what could barely be called homeschooling, a revolving cast of tutors with no teaching experience attempting to fill the void where structured learning should have been. The twins' development faltered in this educational wasteland, their potential buried beneath layers of systematic neglect. The machinery of child protection creaked into motion more than once. In South Carolina, the Department of Social Services received 3 separate complaints, each one a red flag signaling the distress within the Inman household. Yet the investigations yielded nothing, disappearing into the labyrinth of bureaucracy and influence that surrounded the family. The twins would later speak of their father's method for handling such inquiries: direct bribery, using the family's vast resources to purchase immunity from oversight. The rotating cast of household staff bore witness to these daily degradations. Some attempted to provide comfort to the children, but their presence was as transient as everything else in the twins' lives. High turnover among employees meant that stable adult relationships remained elusive, leaving the children adrift in a sea of temporary faces. The Duke Inman fortune, which had originated in the tobacco fields of North Carolina and grown through the electrical currents of hydroelectric power, now generated a different kind of current, one that flowed through the lives of these children, creating not light or progress, but shadows where childhood should have bloomed. Walker Patterson Inman Jr., Skipper, to those who knew him, lived his final years as he had lived all the others, in stark contrasts. He sailed the waters on his yacht, Divine Decadence, cultivating the image of a sophisticated gourmand and collector, his vessels filled with fine foods and rare weapons. The gleaming steel of his gun collection matched the glinting edges of his carefully curated knives and swords. He fashioned himself an adventurer, a free spirit, an explorer. But beneath this carefully constructed facade lurked the familiar demons that had haunted him throughout his life. In 2010, at age 57, Skipper Inman's body was discovered, another victim of methadone, the substance that had promised salvation from addiction but delivered only death. He left behind 12-year-old twins, Georgia and Walker Patterson III, whose lives had been shaped by their father's paradoxical existence, heirs to unimaginable wealth, yet victims of unconscionable neglect. The death of Skipper Inman triggered a seismic shift in the landscape of wealth and custody that surrounded his children. Their biological mother, Daisha Inman, Skipper's fourth wife, emerged from a decade of forced absence to reclaim her role in their lives. The courts, which had stripped her of her children when they were mere toddlers, now reversed course. In August 2010, for the first time since their infancy, the twins returned to their mother's custody. But as the legal machinery churned, it unearthed horrors that had festered behind mansion walls. Tales of scalding baths emerged, alongside accounts of physical torture. The South Carolina Department of Social Services would later confirm what many had long suspected, formally finding that Lee Inman, the children's former stepmother, had indeed physically abused them in 2011. The press descended upon the story with voracious interest, christening Georgia and Patterson the poorest rich kids in the world. The phrase captured the cruel irony of their circumstances. Here were children who stood to inherit a fortune that would have dazzled even the most seasoned of Wall Street financiers, yet whose childhoods had been marked by deprivations that would have shocked the conscience of any poverty-stricken neighborhood in America. Behind the mahogany doors of corporate boardrooms, titans of finance maneuvered through the labyrinth of the twins' inheritance. Citibank and J.P. Morgan, those towering bastions of American banking, found themselves locked in bitter combat with Daisha Inman over control of the vast fortune. When Daisha moved to direct $29 million toward a sprawling Utah ranch, the court's swift intervention highlighted the tenuous nature of her grasp on the children's wealth. As the twins entered their teenage years, their voices began to emerge from behind the veil of privilege and pain. By 2016, the unified front of the twins' legal battles began to crack. Georgia, perhaps seeking closure, moved to end litigation against their former stepmother, Lee. Patterson, however, remained steadfast in his pursuit of justice. This divergence marked yet another chapter in their complex saga, as armies of lawyers descended upon the case, their briefcases bulging with motions and counter-motions. Their 21st birthday arrived on the 23rd of October 2018, with the weight of expectation. But like so much in their lives, this milestone proved more complex than it appeared. The inheritance that had cast such a long shadow over their childhood remained tangled in legal complexities, the full access they had anticipated still beyond their reach. Even worse, reportedly, the actual sum they would likely receive was not even close to $1 billion, with many saying it would be closer to $60 million, if that. But the machinery of justice continued to grind forward. Georgia Inman's motion to disqualify the law firm Grimmer Davis and its attorneys from representing her brother in Wyoming's consolidated trust cases revealed new fissures in the siblings' relationship. When the Wyoming court's special master recommended the firm's disqualification in March 2019, it marked yet another turn in their labyrinthine legal journey. By April 2019, Georgia had taken an unprecedented step, filing a malpractice claim against her former attorneys at Grimmer Davis. The claim spoke to alleged damages to trust assets, another chapter in the ongoing saga of wealth, power, and the complex web of relationships that had defined the twins' lives since childhood. The legal documents, filled with dense paragraphs of judicial language, told a story not just of alleged professional misconduct, but of the persistent chaos that seemed to follow the Inman fortune like a shadow. And then, silence. Like so many stories of wealth and power in American life, the public narrative of the Inman twins faded from view, leaving questions unanswered and resolutions uncertain. By 2025, the children who had once captivated the nation's attention as the poorest rich kids in the world had vanished from public sight, their current circumstances as carefully guarded as the fortunes they stood to inherit. The absence of verified information about their whereabouts, activities, or financial status served as a final, fitting chapter to a story that had always been at its heart about the complex relationship